Yo, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of the SWUS. Continuing on with college football week 1. North Carolina, Minnesota on Thursday night. Good matchup here. Let's get into it.
Welcome to the SWUS. The SWUS. SWUS. Hey, get the SWUS.
All right, like I said, North Carolina's on the road in Minneapolis for this one. Minnesota did open as very short favorites, but actually they're short dogs now. Plus 1.5 looks to be the consensus line across the board. Total sitting at 50.5. Let's take a quick look at the spreadsheet, and according to the model, we're looking at 28.8 Minnesota, 25.3 North Carolina. But again, as I keep saying, really not using the models till like week 3 or 4. So let's get into this one, and we'll start by looking at last year's matchup. Comfortable North Carolina win. Minnesota did do a good job limiting North Carolina on the ground, which I thought would happen. What I didn't anticipate happen was Drake May pretty much doing whatever he wanted. I mean, North Carolina threw for over 400 yards in the game. Final score was 31-13. The crazy part was Minnesota was able to run the ball. They ran for 170 yards. I think it was 5.5 yards per carry. But, I mean, the Minnesota secondary just couldn't hold it down with Drake May. But here's the thing. Let's get into this year's game. Minnesota's going to be in much better shape here. They're returning a ton of production, 19th in the country in returning production, 16 returning starters, 8 on each side. I'm expecting to see the same sort of offense from Minnesota this year that we're used to seeing. Run first, slow pace, control the clock. Here are the Gophers' offensive metrics from last year. I mean, the lack of passing attack is noticeable. 118th in yards per pass attempt, 119th in passing success rate. They were a little better on the ground, 69th in yards per carry, but if you look at success rate and effective rush, takes into account situations, and effective rush takes into account the schedule. It's schedule adjusted, up at 33rd. I mean, they did play in the Big Ten West. You're going to see a ton of top 25 defenses with playing in that division. So Minnesota's rushing offense wasn't completely terrible. It was the passing offense that held them back. Enter Max Brosmer. Now, a lot of people are really excited for this kid to be here. I don't know much about him. He spent 4 years at New Hampshire. Really impressive stats. 8,300 yards, 66 touchdowns to 25 picks, 134 passer rating. Again, you always have to question the transition from FCS into FBS. I'm not going to pretend to know a lot about this kid. I don't. I do know from what I'm reading, they're very excited to have him here. Like I just mentioned, the passing attack was the problem for Minnesota, or the lack of a passing attack, I should say. So maybe this kid is the answer. And as far as the run game goes, they should be just fine. They did lose their RB1, Sean Tyler, but the thing is he missed most of last year with an injury anyway. This is the production Minnesota's returning this year as far as rushing. Over 1,300 yards, 5.1 yards per carry, 8 rushing touchdowns. So they're bringing some backs back. Offensive line's in great shape here for Minnesota. I mean, here are the run blocking and pass blocking metrics from last year. Looking pretty solid, top 50, top 60 across the board. You expect to be a little better than that, though, here at Minnesota. But they are bringing 4 starters back. So no question, the offensive line should take a step forward. I mean, here are the Minnesota game logs as far as offensive production, and there's a lot of red on here, especially from week 6 to week 12. All those Big Ten games. I mean, look at the rushing category. Red. I mean, yeah, Minnesota's offense is definitely a little bit of a problem last year, especially in conference play with 4 starters on the offensive lineman back. A lot of production in the running back room back, and a quarterback that they like coming in. They definitely were not happy with the production they got from Kalik Manis last year. I think there's no question we can expect a step forward from Minnesota offensively. But let's not get too hasty because the North Carolina defense isn't terrible. Here are their numbers from last year. I mean, pretty average across the board, in between 60th and 85th in every single category. Total defense, run defense, pass defense. The returning production on the defensive line looks pretty good. They only lost 1 defensive tackle. That's it. So defensive line should take a step forward. And you see they need it. Look at these defensive line metrics here. Problem is, they lost the best player on their defense. Their leading tackler, linebacker Cedric Gray, he's not there anymore. So although they did bring back some pieces, a little worried about losing the captain of the defense, Cedric Gray. So you take into account Minnesota was able to average 5.5 yards per carry on North Carolina's defense last year. Minnesota's offensive line takes a step forward. They bring a ton of production back in the running back room. North Carolina loses their best player and leading tackler. I think now, especially since this game's in Minneapolis, we can expect Minnesota to be able to run the ball in this North Carolina defense again, maybe even more so. Now, on the other side, we got the North Carolina offense, and obviously, if you watch college football, you know this is the strength of the team. It basically is every single year. Top 25 offensive metrics across the board here for the Tar Heels. Obviously, we know Drake May is gone. NFL first-round pick, New England Patriots. But Omarion Hampton is back, and this dude's a monster. Over 1,500 yards last year, 5.9 yards per carry, 15 rushing touchdowns. In fact, there were times throughout last season where it kind of looked like North Carolina was a run-first team. I mean, obviously, Drake May was the superstar, but so is this kid. So is Hampton, and he's back. And also, they replaced Drake May. Max Johnson is there, and this is a kid with 4 years SEC experience, 2 years with A&M, 2 years with LSU, saw significant playing time as well. So, I mean, is Max Johnson Drake May? Probably not, but no question, Max Johnson can win you some football games because we've seen it. We've seen him beat very good teams, playing some very big games. Here's the problem with the North Carolina offense. Yes, they've got the quarterback, they've got the running back, and they've got receivers, too. They lost Tez Walker, but they've still got weapons. They've got the skill positions, but look at the rest of the returning production here. They're just 99th in the country in returning production, and the offensive line took a big hit. Just one returning starter for the UNC offensive line, and it's the center. And you can see from the metrics, this offensive line was pretty good last year. Pretty good creating space in the run game, pretty good in pass protection. So losing 4 starters in the offensive line, definitely not what you want to see, especially in week 1. Now, if last year was your first year watching college football, you might be thinking, yeah, but Kyle, who cares? They're playing Minnesota. Minnesota's terrible against the run. And you'd be right. Talking about last year, I mean, they were pretty awful against the run. They were much better in pass rush. But here's the thing. That is not characteristic of PJ Fleck's Minnesota teams. In fact, usually it's the opposite. Usually they're a very tough run defense. So in PJ Fleck's tenure there at Minnesota, that would be the outlier. And the Minnesota defensive front is in really good shape here. Like we just pointed out, they had a very good pass rush, and they bring both edge rushers back. 5 of the top 6 linebackers from last year's Minnesota defense are back. So I definitely expect to see Minnesota's defense look more like the elite Minnesota run defense that we're accustomed to seeing during PJ Fleck's tenure here. Also, another thing that was kind of an outlier for Minnesota's defense last year, they were struggling to make stops at home, and that's usually not the case. Usually Minneapolis is a very tough place to go and try and run the ball and score points. So last year was kind of an outlier for their home away splits as well. I expect now that they're bringing a ton of production back in their defensive front, that PJ Fleck will have this defense starting to look like the Minnesota defense we expect to see. I think North Carolina is going to struggle to move the ball here, especially with a brand new offensive line. I like Minnesota's defense in the spot. So as far as betting this game, I do like Minnesota to win. I like Minnesota to win, and I like the under. I'd say 23-21 Minnesota final score. Here's the problem. I'm a little worried about both secondaries. I think the weak spot of both of these defense is the secondary, and I think both teams, if the passing game is fluent, are going to be able to throw the ball on each other, which is why I don't know how much money, if any, I can place on this game because I don't know much about that New Hampshire kid coming in to play quarterback for Minnesota. And also, Max Johnson, we've seen him put up numbers before. Now, part of me wants to say, hey, new offensive line, new system, week 1 on the road in Minnesota, he should struggle. But are we really going to be surprised if Max Johnson comes in and goes off against a Minnesota secondary that's beatable? I don't think so. So there's too many question marks as far as the quarterbacks against the opposing secondaries. For this video, my pick would be Minnesota money line and under 50.5. Gotta say, not sure if I'm going to place a bet in this one, though. Live shows, weekdays 4 p.m. Eastern Time, weekends 10 a.m. Eastern Time. If you're able to make it, would love to see you in the comments. We're going through all the games throughout the week. If you want to see all my open bets, head over to KyleKirms.com and click on View Open Bets. It'll show you every single ticket I personally have open. Also show you all the bets the staff here has open as well. Also, if you sign up for Sauce Network Plus, you get access to the Discord, participate in the betting league, all of that. Head over to the website and sign up if you're interested. Let's have ourselves a nice week 1. Got started off with a decent week 0, made a few dollars. Let's keep it rolling. Remember to bet responsibly. Talk to you in the Discord.